President Trump apparently can't stop his love affair with Goldman Sachs. So look at this. This is from The Intercept. After using Goldman Sachs as a punching bag for his campaign, sharply criticizing his political opponents for ties to the investment bank, Donald Trump has taken unprecedented steps to appoint former Goldman Sachs attorneys and executives to the upper echelons of government. It goes far beyond what's been reported. Not only is Jay Clayton Trump's chair of Securities and Exchange Commission, after serving as the attorney who advised the bank during the bailouts of 2008, but new disclosures show that the team Clayton brought with him to oversee the financial market regulator are also former Goldman Sachs attorneys. While previous administrations have retained staff with ties to major banks, Trump has turned his administration into somewhat of a Goldman Sachs alumni organization. Trump's inner circle consists almost entirely of former Goldman Sachs executives, including his chief political advisor, Steve Bannon, his national security advisor, Dina Powell, and his top economic advisor, Gary Cohn. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin worked at Goldman Sachs for 17 years. Last month, Trump nominated Eric Ueland, a former Goldman Sachs lobbyist, to serve as the Undersecretary of State, one of the most senior posts at the State Department. So this is example number 17,412 of how Donald Trump has absolutely positively no shame. And in his mind, hypocrisy doesn't register. That's not a thing. So you can go back and you can look at the tape. I mean, we had Donald Trump go after Ted Cruz and go after Hillary Clinton relentlessly, mercilessly, over and over and over for their ties to Wall Street and specifically their ties to Goldman Sachs. And he derided them as establishment shills and doing the bidding of their donors and all that stuff. He sounded, in many ways, with his rhetoric on the campaign trail, like a progressive. Second he gets elected, goes in the other direction. Says, no, now I'm going to become an administration that has more Goldman Sachs officials, more Wall Street bankers, more executives in it than any other administration in history. And again, I mean, any normal person would look at this and be a little surprised, but Trump has demonstrated repeatedly that what he says is wholly irrelevant. I mean, look at his rhetoric on jobs and outsourcing. He says, let's do a Made in America week. We need to, buy America, America first. This is how we must do things. Meanwhile, if you look at him, his products are made in 12 different countries. 21 of the 31 items in his hotels are not made in America. So you have a guy who talks the talk in some respects, but he refuses to walk the walk. And if you were to call him out on that, it's a fake news. This is fake news. This is fake news media spreading fake news. But it's not. How are you going to... They're in your administration. Like, where's the question? Where's the open question? We can track exactly where your products come from and where they're made. So where's the question? He rips China repeatedly. There's so many, pictures on Twitter, for example, of people showing the labels on, a Trump ties or a Trump jacket or whatever the case is, and it says, made in China. He rips Mexico. Oh, we're going to build the wall. It's going to be tremendous, believe me. He has products that are made in Mexico. And he rips NAFTA. Guess what? The products that he has made in Mexico are made in NAFTA are made in Mexico because of NAFTA. So he's so immensely full of shit. It's amazing. But it's like he's a pathological liar because he somehow convinces himself that he's not lying when he repeatedly lies to your face. I don't care. You could be the biggest Trump supporter on the planet. When you hear this, the story of Goldman Sachs all over his administration, like, don't you get, you have to pick. You have to say, I agreed with candidate Trump or I agree with President Trump. You don't get to have it both ways. This is a problem that I run into all the time with Trump supporters. I got into it on Twitter yesterday with Tommy Lahren. Now, admittedly, that was on a different issue. But, she's tweeting out this book a veteran gave her, which is like it just blows George W. Bush for for his treatment of the veterans. Look, here's a picture of him painting a dog. Doesn't he care so much about the troops? And I said, hey, dipshit, you were big on the Trump train. Trump on the campaign trail said repeatedly that the war in Iraq was a disaster. We shouldn't have gone in there. It was horrendous. People died. They didn't have to die. We should have taken that money and rebuilt our infrastructure. Which is it? Which is it? Do you agree with candidate Trump or do you agree with George W. Bush? You cannot have it both ways. But they try to have it both ways. I don't know. They're both Republicans. So I agree with both of them at the same time, even though they take the opposite position on the same issue. You can't fucking do that. You have to pick, is candidate Trump right or is President Trump right when it comes to Goldman Sachs and when it comes to Wall Street? The answer is candidate Trump was right, which means you would have to criticize President Donald Trump, which many of them cannot bring themselves to do. And Democrats, oh my God, the fucking Democrats. The fucking Democrats. You know how easy it would be to win an election on this issue alone? On this issue alone. The president from Goldman Sachs. You could have a Democratic wave like we've never seen before if you just hammer home how this guy is only the representative of billionaires and corporations and Wall Street. But guess what? They can't use that line of attack, and they don't use that line of attack because the Democrats, many of them have connections to Goldman Sachs and Wall Street as well. So what do? I don't know. Let's find something where we can hammer away on Trump, but it has like very few policy implications. And Russia. We'll scream about Russia and how he's like an agent of Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin and he's like a puppet to them or something. And then we get to bash the other side without actually promising anything for our voters. How mighty, mighty convenient. So, there you go, man. There's so many... Democratic strategists are the most ineffectual motherfuckers on the planet because given the facts that this president has given us, the ammunition this president and the Republican Party has given us, I could win an election for these people on like one issue and have like 25 other issues just waiting in the reserve tank. Like, okay, we just destroyed them on that issue. Now let's try it out the next one and just go. This is the fucking party from Goldman Sachs, the administration from Goldman Sachs. Liar said he was against Goldman Sachs. Now they're everywhere, and they wrote his goddamn tax plan, and they're doing it to rig the economy for themselves against little people. Against regular people? Do you guys trust little people? Do you guys trust Wall Street bankers to make the best decision for you? Hammer them with that. Hammer them with net neutrality. Hammer them with the idea that they just gutted internet privacy rights. They signed a bill that only 6% of the American people agree with. Trump did, where it allows internet companies to give your information to third parties. Before, they needed your approval to do that. He signed an executive order that allows coal companies to pollute the waterways. I mean, the list goes on and on. The guy continues to deregulate. He says for every new regulation, we need to get rid of 2 regulations. He's governing with, he's doing executive orders that are just right-wing radio talking points. Like, the guy is lost. He's currently escalating in Syria. So, you know how much there is? He's doing so many things that the American people are like, we don't want you to do that. And the Democrats are like, we're not going to talk about any of that, Russia. Please talk about how Goldman Sachs has taken over this administration, how they're a criminal organization, how they did fraud as a business model and got away with it, and how they own the government. Notice, Wall Street gets a bailout when they're in trouble. Do you? Do regular people? No, you don't. You don't. If you fuck up, you get fired. They fuck up. They get bonuses paid for by the taxpayers, and they get propped up by the government. And then they get positions in the government where they get to rig economic policy in favor of them and their rich friends and against regular people. So, President Wall Street sellout, that's Donald Trump.